Welcome to the Bible Momming Podcast, where we are parenting by the book. I'm your host, Paula Whidden. This podcast is for women who struggle with regular mom stuff, but also long to have their kids grow closer to Christ. It's a lifetime journey, and we're in it together. As a real mom, you just never know where I'll be podcasting from, but I'll always be available for you. Now let's get started. Hello, mamas. I am Paula Whidden, and I am your host and mentor mom. I am a former youth and children's pastor, and I am excited to talk with you about all things Bible momming. This is not a straightforward and easy thing. This is kind of complex. Now, as I'm sitting here in my home office, we've got helicopters flying overhead. I'm in an area where it can be fire prone, so if you hear any of that overhead, please understand. But I really wanted to share with you about a topic that has grown near and dear to my heart. I have family members who are adopted, and apparently over the years I've developed many friends who also have adopted children. And so one of the things I end up hearing is the things that excite them, that are great and wonderful, but also some of their frustrations. And as I was hearing some of their frustrations recently, I just kept thinking, wow, I want to help other Bible moms understand what it's like for adoptive families so that they can equip their kids to be kind in the mix. And so what I did is we invited this lovely lady, Leslie Hoff, to the podcast, and she's going to share a bit of her journey as a foster mom and adoptive mom. But we also talk about overall themes related to adoptive parenting, and that comes from a bunch of conversations I had with my friends. So I hope you stick around. This one is a little bit long, so you may end up wanting to break it up into portions because I just didn't want to stop the flow of it. Leslie was sharing some great stuff, and I think it's all amazing. So please stick around and meet Leslie. Hello, Leslie. I'm so glad to have you on Bible Momming today, and I want to make sure that we introduce you and let everybody know who you are. So, Leslie, you are you and a friend of yours run an organization called, is it Foster Love L.A., Foster Love Los Angeles?
Yes, Foster Love Los Angeles, yeah. And we are on Instagram and Facebook if anybody wants to follow us.
Now, tell me, what is Foster Love Los Angeles?
Well, when my husband and I went through the adoption process and fostering process of our son, we, because of our community through church and family, had a really good system of support. And we just thought that kind of came naturally to everybody, but it turns out it really doesn't for foster families. They're kind of sometimes on their own. When they get a foster placement, they don't have a lot of support, be it family or otherwise. So what we do is we collect used items, clothing, not used diapers. We get new diapers. We collect all kinds of baby items. We get a lot of new things. People just donate so generously to us. And we make sure everything is clean and in good condition. And so when a foster family in our area gets a placement, because it usually happens kind of quick, like they'll get a call and they'll say, okay, the 2-year-old's coming today. So they may have the bed, but they're not going to have 2-year-old clothing and the right size diapers. So we bring them a bag with the clothing and weather appropriate clothing and diapers.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Whatever they might need. And let's say they need a baby bouncer. They didn't have that. So if we have one, we get that to them. And we try and deliver within 24 hours of that placement so that they can really work on adjusting to the child being in their home and not have to worry about running to the store to pick up items. Also, because you don't always get your stipend right away to buy them clothing. Sometimes there's a delay in that. So we're just providing them with their basic essentials to get them through that first week or whatever as they adjust. And also it allows us to make a connection with them to say, hey, are you supported well? We have this group available. We have this church available. It allows us to kind of create this community of foster parents that can support each other and be supported by the community around them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize. I mean, you think about the foster care system and you think, oh, it's all a system. It's all organized. But it happens so fast.
Yeah.
Right? Because somebody comes in, there's a dangerous situation in some way, shape, or form. And so the kid is taken out of the home, if I understand correctly. And sometimes they don't even have like a bag or anything, right? It's just the child.
Right. It can be quick. And sometimes if they do grab a few things, it's in a garbage bag. Like they're just literally, they're being removed quickly from what can be a dangerous situation. And then they go to the DCFS office while they look for placement and they just don't have the things that they need. So we'd like to fill that gap for them.
Which certainly helps a lot for, the helping the child. I mean, it's already traumatic.
Yes. Oh,
Being
as you
pulled
can
away from your family.
imagine, right. Good or bad, whatever your family situation is, it's still your family, and going
Correct.
into a new home. So we also, along with the clothes and all these other items, provide a soft blanket and a stuffed animal of some sort, a new one that they can just kind of hold on to. So just to provide as much comfort and things that'll help them adjust as needed.
Okay. And as a result of foster care, then you guys ended up adopting. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, we years ago, when we got married, we knew we wanted to have children, but we waited a little while, and we when we decided to start trying, turns out we had a very hard time getting pregnant. So during that process of infertility, we kind of just were aware of adoption and thought, well, okay, that might be the path we take. And then of course, after a few years of infertility, we stopped trying and I got pregnant. So that's how that works. And then we had 2 more children. But that seed had been planted. We had kind of been aware of it. And so a few years later, when our church, Shepherd of the Hills, did an event where they tried to cover different areas in our community that has needs, they said, we want to give every child a home. And so we went to this event and they talked about how you could adopt from foster care. Because when we had looked back, when we were thinking about adoption, we were kind of overwhelmed in a different sense by the process and the cost of private
scary,
adoption.
right?
We're like, oh my goodness, this is really another process on top of the infertility we'd just gone through. So when we heard about fostering to adopt, there's no cost involved. There's all these children that have a very high need in the city, our own city of Los Angeles. We were like, oh, we didn't know about this.
Right.
And we were honestly really fearful. Like we had preconceived ideas about foster care and, what we've seen on the news. And we just were like, this is not something we want to get into. But God was very pressing with us. And so we were like, okay, this is an act of obedience for us. And as we stepped through the process, we just took one step at a time. It was confirmed that this was something we were supposed to do. So basically we started off, you have to get approved. That took about 6 or 7 months of classes and learning and, CPR and all that kind of stuff. And once we were approved, then you wait for a call. And we were specific in the range of child age and gender for us that we knew would be a good fit into our family, which was very weird to us to do that. But they were very encouraging that you want to be as specific as possible and
be true to you, right?
Right, because they don't want to place a child and have to remove them because it's not a good fit. Like they want stability for that child more than anything. So they really encourage you to make sure it's a good fit within your family. So
it's not. Don't feel guilty if it's like you've always dreamed of having a little girl, and yet you want to be serving God, and you go, oh, it's okay, I could do whatever. But your heart is, I want a little girl. That's going to come out in the relationship, right?
Right. And it's not like in Los Angeles, there are so many children, there's so many needs, the need will be met. So they really want to make a good placement. So they want to encourage you to decide what that looks like for your family. So then you foster, and then we got him our son as a 3-day-old. We picked him up from the hospital.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Which is, it can go many different ways in Los Angeles, but there are a lot of children that get placed as a newborn because of drug addiction. So
yes, I'm familiar with that. I have another friend who had something similar.
Okay, yeah, so it's more common than people think. Actually, in Los Angeles. So, and then we fostered him for 15 months, and we legally adopted him in December of 2013. So,
okay,
yeah.
So now, how old is he now?
He turned 6 in October, so he's in kindergarten full time now and doing really well. He has some struggles, but we have a lot of assistance and help him work through that stuff. So
now you say you have a lot of assistance is that because of the fact that he was adopted through foster care?
Pretty much, because we really, a lot of things that are available to your own biological children too are available. We learned about them through foster care because that's automatically available to him and encouraged. So we're like,
so they make you aware, even though as a biological parent, you're not aware.
Right. Like regional center and as a foster child, they have to do all those assessments and they're really on top of what their needs are. So, because they have to be, because he's technically not your child, he's a ward of the court. So
so they're taking care of him and they're making sure he's okay.
Right. So because of that process, we went through regional center with him. When developmental and educational delays came up, we knew who to contact. So that's been a good process for us because we've been able to help him pretty quickly with whatever his needs are because we have that accessible to us.
Mm. Well, and that's something I think, you said you had fears before doing foster care.
Oh, yeah.
Just, can you be honest with us about what were some of your fears before?
Well, I didn't understand, a lot of people think of, well, if a child's in foster care, it's because they're bad kids. And, we had 3 young children. Our biological children were 7, 5, and 3. So, your thought process is, well, I don't want to bring a child into my home that's going to behaviorally act out on my biological children. But really that's generally not the case. The reason a child is in foster care is because some harm was done to them. They are removed from a harmful situation. So we just had fears about that. And we had fears about the process and what people would think and what would happen later in his life. And just a lot of fears that you really just have to go, okay, this is Satan just trying to deter us. And so we just, every time we came up one of those fears, we would just give it back to God and say, we don't understand this, but we're walking through it. And he would meet us. He would, like, we had fears about going through the classes. We just were like, what are they going to tell us that we don't know? And, it was a secular organization at the time that we went through, and we were like,
you were afraid they were going to tell you things that were going to be bad.
Right. And this is not going to be helpful to us. And every class, we got so much good information, and we met the most amazing people, and God just affirmed it. Whatever fears we had, he's like, nope, I got this.
Isn't that's not funny?
Yeah.
Because, the Bible tells us that God does not give us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and self-discipline. And yet our go-to space is fear.
Yeah. Well, it's Satan's tool. He goes, I'll give him a little bit. I'll scare him a little bit this way. And that'll make up. Because really there was different points where either I wanted to back out or my husband wanted to back out. We didn't always communicate it to each other, which was a good thing because we may have affirmed it and backed out. But so thankful we didn't. But really, it feels overwhelming. It's so scary. It's so unknown.
Yeah.
But it's just step by step. It's taking that next step of faith and not worrying too much about the big picture. God's got that, but just being obedient. And it was really growing for us, in probably more so than anything else in my Christian walk.
Well, that is good to know, because you're right. I mean, there's so many people who hear about the foster care system and they get very hesitant. Now, as you've been doing this, as you were going through the adoption process, the fostering process, were there difficulties that you had as you were going through the process? Or difficulties your son had or your other children?
Yes. Well, we were really receptive to him initially. A little tiny baby, they adored him. But as we went through the process, and we had honestly a best case scenario, we had an unusual case in that it was pretty fast tracked. There wasn't a lot of, we didn't do any visitation with the biological family because unfortunately his mom was incarcerated. So we didn't have to do what a lot of foster families have to do. Which can be, you're meeting with biological family, you're caring for their child. There's a lot of things you have to work through in that. We didn't have to do that. But when he was about 8 months old, we did get a call from his social worker that the biological father had been named. Previous to that, we didn't know who he was. They weren't going to worry about him because he wasn't on the birth certificate, which turns out he was. But anyway, complicated issues with DCFS. But so when he was named, we knew what that meant, that they had to find out where he was, who he was he interested in this child, and did he have family that might want to adopt him or take him, which meant like if he had a mother or a sister or anybody in his family that they had priority over us, even though we had been raising him since a newborn. And my husband and I it just took us so back and devastated because we thought this is our son. He's 8 months old. We're very attached to him. And then the realization of not only are we attached to him, our biological children are completely attached to him, our extended family, our friends. Yeah. We have disrupted everybody's life with our decision. And we were just this fear set over us. And fortunately, it turned out the father had been deported, and it didn't, not fortunate for him, but fortunate for us. And so it turned out to be a non-issue, but it really just brought to light that this is the decision we made in faith really is affecting a lot of people. Right. And it was very scary, but it turned out okay for us in the end. So,
well, and that can happen. And on the plus side, I mean, if there's a parent who is capable and good, I mean, it can be, look at all those loving people
right,
that have been an impact in that kid's life. And,
right.
you were filling a
And
gap, but
right.
in this
And
case, you
now,
guys got to adopt.
yes. And that's actually a little more unusual. Because maybe it was 6 years ago, I think the pendulum has swung a little bit more towards the reunification side, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm very pro that too. We want to reunify. I mean, really the best case scenario for any child is to be raised in their biological family, in a very safe, loving environment. That's
Right.
not what happens. Sin has broken that. But
Yeah.
if we can make the family whole again, make the biological family whole again, that's the goal of the courts. And really that should be the goal of foster parents, which makes it challenging because you get attachment and all that. But if you can love a child for a certain amount of time and provide for them and give them comfort and love and security while this biological parent is getting themselves clean or whatever it needs to happen, that's a really amazing thing to do, but not easy.
Okay. Now, I think this is probably very similar between adoptive parents and biological parents, but what is the best part of being an adoptive parent?
Oh, the best part. I think for me personally, it has allowed me to see Jesus at such a deep level that I've been a Christian since I was a teenager, and I loved God. I understood Jesus. I love Jesus, but this is at this level, it was a whole new eye opening for me, in that to love the unlovely, to love, really putting everything forth, even when it's really, really hard. And so for me, that's been the best part of the process, aside from the fact that we have this beautiful little boy as part of our lives. Yeah.
That's awesome. Did he have any challenges, or do you guys have any challenges since you adopted him that were unique because of the adoption?
Yes. I personality wise, I think when you have biological children, you understand, like you can look at them and they'll have behaviors and you kind of understand them because they either are similar to you or to your husband. With him, nothing he does is similar to any of us. So it really was kind of a relearning of parenting, and really understanding how to meet his needs in a very different way. The traditional parenting that we did with our biological parents just doesn't work with him. We've come to find out he's ADD, ADHD, very high. So he needs some help, to pay attention in school. And that was just all new to us because our biological children they just adapted to school really well, and he just hasn't. So it's been really figuring out what works for him. And he's very extroverted, high talker, nonstop kid. Like he does not stop moving, does not stop talking. And our other three are fairly mellow and just kind of laid back, like my husband and I. So really adjusting as a family to the constant activity, the constant noise, his needs being met more constantly than our other three. So that's been pretty challenging for us because we're in we set it a certain way, and it's doing it differently, and adapting to that. So
now you mentioned that he came out of being, his mom was addicted to drugs. Mm-hmm. Were there things that you had to deal with that were related to that? I mean,
we don't know. We fortunately, he did not have withdrawals when.
Praise God.
That was
I know that does happen.
Yeah. So he was actually a very easy baby. It became more challenging when he was about 2 or 3. He was delayed in speech and a few things, but as I've met with his doctor at Kaiser, it really could be hereditary, or it could be due to what happened in utero. There's just no way to know that because
shock things that can happen.
Right. Because, so much development and so much happens in utero. And obviously some of that was missed and some of that was, had drugs and possibly alcohol involved. So we don't know because we know what she's told us, but that's very little. So we just kind of have to do what's best for him where he's at. Could be hereditary, could be trauma induced. We don't know. So we just kind of have to work through it as each thing comes up.
Well, and as you mentioned this, one of the things that other families have told me, because I come out of I have 2 cousins who are adopted, and I have several friends who've adopted kids as well. And one of the things that I'm noticing is when it comes to medical health, depending on how connected you are to the birth family, it can be challenging to know, like they always ask you those questions, in all the different forms. What's your family history? And that's not, is that something that within the foster care system you have access to, or is it?
They give you what they know, but a lot of times they don't know much because, like for instance, in this case, his biological mother was a meth addict. So when they're an addict, some of what they say is truthful. Some of it is trying to protect their from getting in trouble. We just know what's based, whatever they've given her is what we've got, and it's not much. So
Okay.
you might get more if you have a relationship with them. You might be able to ask more questions. That's not been our case, but you can. And a lot of times DCFS, I mean, they've got a lot of paperwork and a lot of things that they're trying to manage and oversee. And truthfully, LA County is so overwhelmed.
It can get missed.
Right. So there's things that can get missed, and that's just where the discovery part comes in. You just have to get good doctors, and we've been so fortunate with every doctor. They've said, okay, we understand this, they've worked with us and helped us figure it out. So,
well, that's one thing that for moms who say they're trying to train up their kids to be courteous and kind, and they themselves want to be aware of stuff, because there are people that are, teachers, they're involved in administrative stuff, things like that, just to be aware that not all adoptive families know all that stuff, right?
Right. Correct. They don't. Yeah.
Now, how have people in your life responded to your son? Because he has a Latino background and you do not, correct?
Right. Generally, it's funny you ask that. I think I see, because I'm on some foster parent Facebook pages, and I see more things out there than we experience. We did experience a few things. Our church family, everybody close to us has been amazing, but I have had questions from strangers. I had a man one time ask me, "Oh, are these kids all yours?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And he said, "Well, the same father?" I said, and that's really none of your business. But I really don't think he was trying to be unkind. I think he was just curious. But and at the time, my son was pretty young. Now that would be a difficult question, because he can, because he can understand it and he can hear it. And I want people to be aware. It's not my sensitivity, although it may be for some foster parents. I'm concerned about his journey and his questioning of who he is. And we're going to have challenges in that. There's no getting around it. But just for people to be sensitive to the child, what might make them feel left out or make them feel odd or different. That's what we want to avoid.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of my cousins, and her complexion looks different than mine, and we were talking about one of the things that bothered her. She's an adult now, and she was saying one of the big thing that bothers her when people talk about her quote unquote real family, and she's like,
they're your
real family.
Yeah. Real, what does real mean? Yeah.
Even just talking with her, it was kind of funny, because I'm thinking, you're my real cousin. You're
right. And it's, I had to relearn the verbiage too, because I had never said any of those things insensitive. Like, I wasn't trying to be, that's just how you communicate. But when you really think about it, what do you mean real family? I am their real family. I'm his real mom. But that's not what people mean. You just have to really think about your wording and how you say things and what might be implied by it.
Well, one of the things that I have come to realize as I've spoken with my different friends is that even though I grew up in a background, I'm incredibly inquisitive, as you could tell in my questions, right? I'm incredibly inquisitive, and I was always taught there's no such thing as a bad question, that it's good to ask questions. But what I'm learning is that specifically when you're dealing with an adoptive family, sometimes those questions, just the question, can make a kid feel hurt.
Right. Yeah. And we haven't experienced that with our son yet because he's young, but that's going to come. And so that's where I would want people to be sensitive to. I'm, like I said, I'm open, but he might not be. He may decide that this is an area he wants to protect or he doesn't want to talk about yet. Mm-hmm. And I just would want people to be sensitive to that, to let him journey that as he needs to and be supportive of it as he figures out his identity.
Yeah. And we all are trying to figure that out, but we don't have some of the same hurdles in life.
Right. And they have hurdles. That's just like any teen or any school age kid, they have those hurdles, but there's also an added layer to it for them.
Well, that's because if I understand correctly, the nature of adoption, and correct me if I'm wrong, the nature of adoption always means that there's some kind of pain somewhere.
Yes, it's broken. It's trauma induced. They're removed from what God intended as the right family, is biological birth family. They've been removed from that, and they will always long for that. It's trauma induced. So it doesn't matter if it happened as a 3-day-old. There was trauma in utero. It's not the ideal situation. God can make it good. It can be amazing, but they're still going to, at some point, they're going to want to figure that out, what that means for them.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who adopted a baby who different complexion, and they had some of the same questions and things like you mentioned. And one of the things that as she got especially into past 11 and getting into her teen years, she just really didn't want to hear the word adoption. She didn't want, she's because her mom's adoption story was there was a community around her. There was conversations, there were questions, there were all this kind of stuff. Whereas her adoption story it just happened. And she didn't have a choice. This was not that she didn't like her family, but so she didn't want anything that separated her from the regular environment of the home. And so anytime her mom would tell somebody that she was adopted, because the person would ask a question, it bothered her.
Right.
Because it made her different.
Yeah, set her apart when she just wants to be part of the family, considered part of the family. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's something that we need to be aware as moms, as we're training our kids. When you see somebody, especially, we have the advantage of California. I love the rich diversity of California.
Oh, me too. I love it.
Just, because, and I, unfortunately, I'm not in other parts of the country, so I can't really see what it's like in other places. But I know that people seem to have, at least in our community, recognized people are people, and they're all different kinds of combinations of cultures and stuff in families all around me. And so I love that. And it's just one of those, hey, if you see somebody different, well, that's kind of normal.
Right.
In our area.
Right. It is. And I actually have been so grateful. I remember my mom saying that to us when we were kids, because I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. So I know no different. And she said, as much as people complain about it here, and I too, I love it here. I love the weather. She said, I was always grateful that you were exposed to just all kinds of diversity, because, and I feel the same way about my kids, that they just have, there's a lot of different people in their lives and different cultures and ethnicities. And I love that. I love that they're exposed to all that, because it's really showing us God's kingdom.
Yeah, it's like getting to travel around the world without ever leaving your backyard.
Right.
Yep. It's something fun about that. Now, are there things you wish that other people knew about adoption that we haven't talked about yet?
I would just say that if you know foster families, especially adoptive families in your life, just that they need another layer of support. They need to feel that they're supported and that they're not necessarily understood. You can't really understand what they're going through, but that you're not judgmental of it, that you're just there for what they need, because it's really, and some foster families go through a really rough road with things that they're dealing with the biological families, possibly with the child, and behavior issues, especially if they're older. And they just need a break. They need love and support, and just a lot of additional help that any parent would need. They need another layer of it. And so if there's anybody that that you could just extend that to, whether it's a meal or just, can I give you a couple hours to go shopping? Or it could be really grueling. And you're dealing with a lot of outside people too, telling you what to do.
Yeah, which happens to all moms, right? But it happens
on another level, because you have social workers coming into your home saying, well, this is what you need to do. I remember with Samuel, a very minor thing, but they were always saying he's not getting enough stomach time. When he's a baby, the back of his head is flat. And I said, well, it was just, he has a flat head. But every time, and it was just an issue. And the reality is didn't matter that I was raising him in my home. He is not mine to say what happens and what doesn't happen. Anything medically or educationally, it was not my decision, whether or not I knew best. So I just really had to abide by that and say, okay. And you have these people in your home all the time, and it's exhausting. But it's in the best interest of the child in the long run. And so just really supporting them, as much support as you can give, they need it.
That's good to know. Yeah. Now, how do you think people can best be supportive? You were saying more support and all that. What can they do to be supportive of you and your child or children?
That's such a good question, because I think everybody thinks, well, you've adopted, you're expecting me to foster and adopt. And I would say that is not for everybody. That was a very clear path God put ahead of us. I would say first, if you have that inkling or that desire, you've been thinking about it, I would step into it, because we did, and we're so grateful we did. But I think a lot of people have fear from it and they back away from it. But really, if you decide, oh, this might be something I want to do, you're not going to have a child in your home tomorrow. It doesn't, it's a long process. So you'll know definitively through that process if it's for you. So I would first say, acknowledge the fear and kind of walk through it. If you know for sure that fostering or adopting is not in your family, does not work in your family dynamic, there's a lot of other things you can do. Support families that are fostering, whether it be bringing them meals. I think, like when you have a newborn in your home, people bring you meals. It's amazing because you're exhausted. It's the same scenario. Thinking about making a meal can be overwhelming. So meals are great. If you,
it's a special treat any way you look at it. If some friend of mine decided, hey, I want to come and bring Paula a meal, I don't think I would reject it.
Never, ever.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Anytime. My door is available. But Shepherd, at our church specifically, we really are trying to launch next year how we can support foster families. And there's a lot of different ways, through the meals, through if you maybe want to have a higher commitment level, but you don't want a foster child, there's all kinds of things you can do mentoring these children specifically. You can be a court-appointed advocate for them. You could be an educational advocate. There's some training involved in those things too, but it's a little higher commitment than, possibly bringing meals or whatever. And it might be, a way to really be a good mentor for a child. You can provide goods for Foster Love. You can do a diaper drive. You can do meet their physical needs, make sure that they're getting toys at Christmas, which we're doing through Shepherd too. Be like the support groups that we're going to be doing at Shepherd. We want to provide meals for them. We don't want them to come on a Tuesday, get their kids there, on a school night and then have to bring food. We want to provide that for them.
Too much on your plate. It's just
right.
Yeah. We want you to come over, but you got to feed everybody first, and you got to find your babysitter, and you got to find, it's like,
providing babysitting, you don't have to be, it's good if you can be approved and go through the process to do babysitting, but it's really up to the foster parent has that choice to say, I trust them as a babysitter. If you could babysit for a few hours, I think you can do up to 10 hours without going through a, approval process, and just giving them a few hours away to go do some shopping, to get a break, to kind of breathe a little bit. Yeah. Just anything that might support the family is always a good thing to do.
Well, because there's in some ways it's like there's a higher learning curve. Just because you're going outside of the dynamics that your family is familiar with. Although, to be fair, I mean, say you have a special needs kid or things like that. Yes, there's going to be a learning curve there too, regardless.
Yes.
But just kind of a friend of mine mentioned, like with her baby who came from a drug environment, there was a lot of, for her, it was not best case scenario. There was a lot of baby screaming. There was a lot of, just to help her kind of normalize.
Right.
And so in the interest of fatigue,
you're right.
And fatigued people don't make the best choices. So,
right. Yep.
So being able to say, you know what, I'm going to give you an hour of free babysitting. I want you to go shopping and take your time.
Yeah. Take a nap in the car, whatever.
Because imagine how tough it is to just go shopping if your baby is struggling, with their own sense of sanity and equilibrium. So they're crying the whole time. I mean, we've heard them.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but every time I hear a mama whose baby is crying in the grocery store, I feel for them.
Yes. Yeah. and not everybody does though too. Like I that's one thing I would say, my son's behavior is very different than our biological children. He's not a rule follower. He doesn't step in line, and so sometimes
this is part of the beauty of him too, right?
Right. Exactly. I love that. I think, oh man, he is going to be such a strong individual older. It's not easy to parent, but it really, he has such great strengths, but it can be super frustrating, super exhausting. And sometimes you let behavior slide because you're just tired. Yeah. And that is something I would have harshly judged in the past, of a child acting out and a parent not doing anything about it. And I think you don't know, no judgment anymore. And
you don't know, what's been done. You don't know.
And trauma parenting is parenting a child from trauma is a whole different thing. There's certain things you can't spank, you can't nor should you. There's a lot of things that you really have to consider. Their behavior is really a different thing than my biological children's behavior can be. It can be really a cry for need, or it's very different. So you really have to really lax off the judgment and just give a lot of grace and love to them and to the parent that's parenting them is really important.
Yeah, because you don't know. You don't know this kid, this is their first time out in a week and a half, and they just want to get cereal and milk, and they're out.
Right.
And you don't know. You don't know what's going on. So it's when you see somebody in the grocery store, regardless, you just don't want to go. You should.
Yeah, it's not helpful. Who is it helpful for? Nobody.
Yeah. I think somebody I know they call that shooting on other people.
Yes.
Go shit on other people.
Yep. And I would say if you there's a really good movie out right now. You've probably heard of it, called Instant Family.
No.
Mark Wahlberg. It's with Mark Wahlberg, and it's about a couple that ends up adopting 3 children out of foster care. And it's, there's quite a bit of cussing in there. I wouldn't take children to see it, but
okay, fair point.
They do a very good job of giving a pretty good picture of what it looks like. And I think the writer and the director actually adopted 3 older children out of foster care. So he knew what he was talking about. And it really, if you're a non-foster adoptive parent, it will give you a pretty good understanding of what they go through. Not everything, but it really does. I was surprised at what a good job it did. So it's a very funny movie. It's a touching movie. So it's worth a date night. I think it's PG-13, but like I said, there's some teen issues and cussing that, I wouldn't take younger children to.
Well, and one of the things I think, we need to realize that every adoptive family has their own unique story, right?
Yeah.
And this is deeply personal stuff.
Right.
This is, like the equivalent of asking somebody about, exactly how did you birth your baby,
Right. Right.
It's deeply, and so when we just see somebody, we can't say, oh, that's an adoptive family. Oh, it must be like this. It doesn't work that way.
No, it could be very different for each one based on the circumstance. They could have a relationship with a biological family. They could have no relationship. They could have these behavioral issues. They could not have these. There's so many variables to it because all of us are so different. The same is true in these too. So
I think that's so important. Now, for the family that's considering adoption, what advice would you like to give them?
To really, like I was saying earlier, just pray through it, talk to the right people, ask questions that you think are really not okay to ask. Like not to adoptive family necessarily, but if you know somebody that's willing to be open with you, ask the hard questions because
ask permission to ask those hard questions.
And ask them because we were glad that we did. Like I was saying, we felt weird about being specific about the age and the gender of our child, but they really encouraged us to do that. They wanted to make a good placement. So those things that feel kind of weird or feel that you have concerns about, bring those forth because we found them to be met at every step. And so I would ask those questions and find the right people to talk to, find the right agency to talk to, having a good agency to go through, especially if it's your first time considering fostering specifically, find a FFA, which is a foster family agency, because they will add support to you. If you go directly through the county, you'll have a social worker from the county, but if you go through an agency, you will also have a social worker from the agency. And I think the more support you can get, especially the first time through, the better.
I think what I'm going to do is I want to put some links in the show notes. And so I'm going to ask you to email me organizations or things that you think would be good for families to know about if they're considering adoption themselves. So that I can put that in the show notes, and that way people can easily find that, because it can be a big hunting process too, right? As they're just trying to figure things out.
Right. And I don't know that we have a lot of them on Foster Love. We're still working on our website, but so I'll be sure to get you some links of some organizations we know that we trust and would be great for people to walk through it with.
Thank you. That I think that's going to be huge. And I've just had so much fun with the conversation we're having. Now, one of the things I always ask everybody that comes on the show, I always ask, what is your favorite Bible verse right now?
Well, it's kind of specific to today. I was reading this morning and I came across 1 Corinthians 13:2, which says, if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not love, I am nothing. And I know we've all heard that, but for me specifically, it's just, really finding that love in my family. If, because the weird thing about fostering and adopting is people go, oh, you guys are so amazing. You did this thing. And I'm like, man, the people close to you will assure you that is not true.
You're just a regular mom trying to figure it out.
And it really was just a small step of faith that led to another small step that ended up to a big faith journey. And if I had that faith, but along the process, it's hard to always have the love. And now that we're in this process, and it's really can be very challenging with my son. The faith, it all looks good, but am I loving him hard day in and day out? Sometimes it's really challenging because it's disruptive, and it's not the path we thought we were taking. And so to really just love him and my children and make sure that that's always the priority is where I'm at today.
So I think that could speak to moms of all different backgrounds.
Right, exactly. But this morning I was like, oh yeah, I need to get back to the love. So
yeah. I had for a long time on one of my walls, I had, those words on the walls, where it said, love is patient, love is kind. Yeah. And it was on the wall that I would often yell down the hallway.
Yeah. You're like, I got to take that down so I can yell.
No, actually, I came to the conclusion, I did it originally because, this will be good for our family. But really, it was for me.
Right.
It was either before or after I yell. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's that sign again. Darn it.
So just out of curiosity, Leslie, how can we be praying for you?
Well, again, specific to this week, we're presenting to shepherd a kind of a game plan for next year and a budget that goes along with that. And I've been in good contact with DCFS in Chatsworth, and we're just really trying to get everything connected to really support this system well as a church. We believe with all of our hearts that this is a broken system that can only be fixed by the hope of Jesus, and the church is the one that provide that. So as we go forward through this process, the challenges are going to come, and we want to really do it well so that we can see a big change, specifically in the county of Los Angeles in terms of foster care, which is in absolute crisis mode. So I just think the game plan of for churches and us all being working together and making this happen is what my huge prayer is right now, because it's happening and I'm super excited about it, but it doesn't happen overnight and it's a big process. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. And for people who aren't necessarily in the Los Angeles area, that doesn't mean your area doesn't have people in need.
For sure.
So you can look into it, you can find out. And the church, we're supposed to be, true religion is to care for the widows and the orphans. And many of these kids may not be orphans, but they certainly feel like it.
Right.
So just being aware that that's part of what we as the body of Christ are supposed to do. We're supposed to reach out to help out those who can't help themselves.
Right. Yep. And give them the hope that only we've got. Nobody else has the hope we have. So it really, in our minds, is the church is the answer in all of this. So just really making those connections and loving people where they're at.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and to share and be very, very open and vulnerable about your story with these moms, because it's an awkward question to ask. And I hope that we have helped many people in the process of having this conversation. So thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Now, mamas, that was a fun interview for me to get to do. And I just want to encourage you, if you have questions, I've got some links in the show notes. You can go to BibleMomming.com and you can read the show notes for this episode under the podcast. And I just want to encourage you to be aware as you are figuring out how to be supportive of adoptive families. There are many, many options out there. Also, please, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe and scroll down to the bottom, give it a rating, give it a review. This helps other people know about the podcast, and it is such a huge blessing. We thank you so much for helping us out and helping this podcast to grow and let people know about it.
I've enjoyed this time we have together. I know you have plenty of things to do and many options, so thank you for listening. Remember, love is patient, love is kind, and that is never more real than in our families. God bless you and have a great week.